In the year 1324, a man left his home. He was not a soldier. He was not a conqueror. He did not carry a sword. He carried gold, so much gold, that the moment he set foot in Egypt, he single-handedly destroyed its economy. For the next 12 years, his name was Mansa Musa, and he was the richest human being who has ever lived on this earth. But this is not just a story about wealth. This is a story about what power really means, what it costs, and what happens when you have more of it than the world can handle. Because Mansa Musa didn't just change the global economy. He left behind lessons about leadership, humility, and the dangerous seduction of excess, lessons that the modern world has completely forgotten. Welcome to the wiser age. To understand Mansa Musa, you first have to understand the world he was born into. It is the early 14th century. Europe is in the grip of famine and plague. The Middle East is recovering from the devastation of the Mongol invasions. And most of the Western world believes that sub-Saharan Africa is a land of mystery, unknown, unmapped, and underestimated. They could not have been more wrong. The Mali Empire at this time is one of the largest, most sophisticated, and most prosperous civilizations on Earth. Stretching across nearly 2 million square kilometers of West Africa, it controls the most important trade routes in the known world. Routes that carry two things more valuable than almost anything else in medieval civilization: salt and gold. The empire's gold mines at Bambouk and Bou produced more than half of the entire world's gold supply. Let that sink in. More than half of all the gold in the world. And all of it flowed through one man's hands. Mansa Musa came to power around 1312. Inheriting an empire already rich beyond comprehension. But under his rule, the Mali Empire didn't just maintain its wealth, it multiplied it, it expanded, and it announced itself to the world in the most extraordinary way imaginable. In 1324, Mansa Musa decided to make the Hajj, the holy pilgrimage to Mecca that every Muslim is called to complete at least once in their lifetime. For most people, this was a humble spiritual journey, a test of faith and endurance. For Mansa Musa, it became the single most spectacular display of wealth in human history. He left Mali with a caravan of 60,000 people. 60,000, 12,000 of them were personal servants. Each one wore silk and carried a golden staff. 80 camels carried between 50 and 300 pounds of gold dust. Each 500 servants marched directly ahead of Musa himself, each carrying a golden staff weighing nearly 3 kilograms. The procession stretched as far as the eye could see. Travelers who witnessed it couldn't find the words to describe it. The Arabic chronicler Al-Umari, who interviewed witnesses years later, wrote that the sight was so overwhelming, it defied description. But when Mansa Musa reached Cairo, that's when things got interesting. He stopped, he rested, and he spent. He gave gold to the poor in the streets. He gave gold to mosques. He bought gifts for the Sultan of Egypt. He tipped servants and merchants with amounts that left entire families wealthy for generations. He spent so much gold in Cairo that he flooded the entire Egyptian market with the metal. And when you flood a market with gold, gold becomes less valuable. Overnight, the price of gold in Egypt collapsed. Merchants who had built their entire livelihoods around gold trading watched their wealth evaporate. The Egyptian economy went into a spiral that historians estimate took over a decade to recover from. One man, one journey, one act of generosity, and an entire nation's economy was shattered. When Mansa Musa returned from his pilgrimage, he brought something back with him more valuable than gold. He brought architects. Among his traveling companions was a celebrated Andalusian poet and architect named Abu Ishaq al-Saheli. And under his guidance, Mansa Musa transformed his empire. He built mosques. He built palaces. He built schools and libraries and universities. The city of Timbuktu, already a thriving center of trade, became one of the most important centers of learning in the entire medieval world. At its peak, the University of Sankore had as many as 25,000 students. Its libraries held hundreds of thousands of manuscripts on mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, and law. Think about what that means. While much of medieval Europe had literacy rates in the single digits, the Mali Empire under Mansa Musa was producing scholars, scientists, and legal experts at a scale that would not be matched in the West for centuries. Mansa Musa ruled an empire of perhaps 40 to 50 million people. Roughly half the world's population at the time lived under his domain or traded within his sphere of influence. His personal wealth, adjusted for today's values, has been estimated at $400 billion. To put that in perspective, that is more than Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Bill Gates combined. But here is where the story gets complicated, and here is where the lesson begins. Because Mansa Musa's reign, for all its magnificence, planted the seeds of the empire's eventual collapse. His pilgrimage, that legendary, awe-inspiring journey, had consequences he never anticipated. The economic damage in Egypt created resentment. The display of Mali's wealth put the empire on the map in ways that attracted dangerous attention. And the enormous cost of the pilgrimage itself, all that gold, all those gifts, strained the empire's resources. More importantly, Mansa Musa had built an empire so dependent on his personal genius and vision that it struggled to survive without him. When he died, around 1337, his successors lacked his skill, his authority, and his ability to hold the vast empire together. Within decades, the Mali Empire began to fracture. Vassal states broke away. The Songhai people to the east grew more powerful. Trade routes shifted. By the early 15th century, the empire that had once controlled half the world's gold was a shadow of its former self. And by the time European explorers began to document West Africa in earnest, the Mali Empire had largely been forgotten. Its libraries looted, its manuscripts scattered, its story buried under centuries of colonial narratives that had no interest in acknowledging what had once stood there. One of the greatest civilizations in human history, nearly erased. So what does any of this have to do with your life today? Everything. Because the story of Mansa Musa and the Mali Empire is not just history, it is a mirror. And if you look closely enough, you will see yourself and the world around you reflected in it. Lesson 1. Visible wealth attracts invisible threats. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage announced to the entire world that Mali was the richest place on earth. And while that brought prestige and admiration, it also brought envy, ambition, and eventually predators. The moment you display your resources, your advantages, your position, you invite competition you didn't ask for. The wisest people in history have always understood. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. Lesson 2. Generosity without strategy is destruction. Mansa Musa gave away gold in Cairo out of genuine generosity. He wasn't showing off. By his own standards, he was simply being charitable. But he failed to understand the system he was operating in. Good intentions, applied without understanding of consequences, can cause tremendous damage. Wisdom is not just about what you give. It's about understanding what happens after you give it. Lesson 3. An empire built on one person is one death away from collapse. Mansa Musa was extraordinary, but he built a structure that required his extraordinariness to function. The moment he was gone, the entire thing began to unravel. The greatest leaders in history don't just build empires, they build institutions, systems, and cultures that outlast them. Your legacy is not what you achieve, it is what continues to function when you are no longer there. Lesson 4. History belongs to those who write it. The Mali Empire was one of the most sophisticated civilizations that ever existed, and most people today have never heard of it. This is not an accident. The stories we tell about the past shape what we believe is possible in the present. When entire chapters of human achievement are buried or erased, We all lose something. Seek the full story, always. Mansa Musa stood at the top of the world. He commanded armies, fed millions, and funded universities that lit the way for generations of scholars. He was also a man who made decisions that, in their scale and visibility, accelerated the eventual unraveling of everything he had built. He was human, brilliant, flawed, and human. And that is precisely why his story matters. Because power without wisdom is just weight. Wealth without understanding is just risk. And greatness without humility is just a longer fall. The wisest age is not the past. It is whatever age learns from it. If this video made you think, subscribe to The Wiser Age. A new documentary drops every week. History is not behind us. It is underneath us. Learn it.